everybody, welcome to today's episode where we are going to be doing a look around the December forecast, but kind of in a let's look back in order to look forward kind of way. And if you are used to being around here, you know I love to pattern track in everything that I do every week, every month, every yearly. I'm sending you back into your own patterns to see what has happened, what's played out, and what does it look like now, because it's your best forecasting tool for where you're going moving forward. So if we haven't met before, I'm Stormie Grace, and I am a professional astrologer, and I love translating the energy of the stars, giving you a nice interpretation so that you can go out and live your best life with the energy that is available to you. And today I brought another beautiful astrologer in to talk about this forward back kind of dynamic. Taylor Shuler, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be with you, Stormie.
Yeah, we're pumped to have you. And, you know, not to just like be your hype lady, but most promising astrologer award.
Thank you.
You know, we're just in the presence of greatness. I don't know what else to say.
That's very, very nice of you. And thank you. Thank you.
It's all the Venus in my chart, but I do mean it. So that's nice too. I had an interesting experience this week, so I really would love to hear your take on it before we even jump into this. And I would love to hear in the comment section down below, you guys, your experience with it. My chart has a ton of Venus. It is the primary energy besides Mercury that is running around. And I found out this week that when you have so much Venus, right, like just the way the planet vibrates, it's so charming. It's so charming. So I was actually giving somebody some news that they weren't really going to like, and I was watching them be charmed, and the way they were receiving the information was like delicious. It was a really interesting experience, and I was like, I wonder if other people with really high Venus have this as well, because my husband has high Mars in his chart, and he says nice things to people, and they're like, well, I mean, what do you mean by that? You know, and so it's a very, I was like, so, you know, first of all, if you've got a lot of Venus, or you've got a heavy Venus person in your life, please tell me in the comment section down below. What are you like charmed when you interact with them? What does that feel like? And Taylor, what's your experience with the Venus vibration?
Absolutely. I 100% I'm there with you with the Venus vibes. And I think it's not just like natally though. Like I'm having this experience more recently where my natal Venus is being activated. And so I'm having more of those experiences where I'm like, oh, this is nice. I like this, you know? Whereas like natally, my Venus like doesn't do a whole lot for me. And I do have like a Mars. And so I'm more like your husband in that situation where it's like, oh, that's difficult. So good on you. I'm glad. You know, we need more sweetness in the world. We need more ease. We need more joy. We need more love and togetherness. And so we need you Venus people to like help us come together.
Yeah, I agree. So Venus on, it only becomes weird when you're like, wait, I'm like saying a mean thing right now. Excuse me. Don't be charmed. I'm upset. You know, you know what I mean? Yeah. All right. Enough of that, but let's get into the looking forward, looking back of December. And I think honestly that Venus is a fantastic place to start, because when we started 2022, we came in with a really activated Capricorn signature and Venus retrograde in Capricorn, you know, so we just had all of the focus there. And as we're going to end out 2022 and move to 2023, not only do we have a reactivation of this particular area, but Mercury begins its retrogrades in Earth, in Capricorn. So we are really in the look at what's been here kind of vibration. I would love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, so I think Venus is definitely going to be a focus this month. I think it makes a lot of aspects this month. It's so much about relationships, about togetherness, and about looking backwards at some of not only like the beginning of the year. I think this, you know, looking back to look ahead. Yeah, we had that Venus retrograde in Capricorn. We're having a lot of Venus activations. We just had the Venus star point in Libra, move into Libra at 29 degrees of Libra recently. That was at the end of October. But so many of these Venus transits are going to bring us back to the summer. They're going to bring us back to the fall. And so it is really interesting because right at the beginning of the month, like around December 9th, we get Venus moving into Capricorn again. And before the end of the year, like the very, what is it? The last day or 2 days before the end of the year, we've got on the 29th, we've got Mercury stationing retrograde in Capricorn. So it really is full circle in so many ways. I think we're going to not be able to do anything except be reminded. Like I just don't think there's any escape of the reminder. And I don't know about you, Stormy, but recently I have been just like, what year is it? Like I go to write the date and I'm having that thing. Usually this time of year, I'm like, oh, it's definitely this year. Like it's definitely 2022. And when I get in January, I'm still saying 2022. I'm actually like already like, wait, no, I think it's 23.
Yeah.
And so there's just like this weird thing with time going on right now where it's like, I'm not really sure where I'm at. But I do think that December is going to bring us into the present moment, but also merge all of this like past and the present. And then it's going to speak to the future as well in many, many ways. So I know I just jumped all over the place. But
No, I felt like that was really, that's really good. And it's really on par because these are some of the things that I have this acknowledgement around as well. And truly, I think one is the hazard of the profession that I'm like, wait, what year am I in? Right? And you guys know, I hustle, right? So I'm already into these 2023 videos. So it's very easy for me to not know what year I'm in. And then we just did a talk with SJ Anderson and they're in 26, 27. So it is, job hazard also. But I think too, a big signature that came up for people around that Venus retrograde in Capricorn when we started was really like, what do I value even in terms of time and where I place, priority? And so really, truly, this acknowledgement and this value of time is really different. And I see that with people left and right this year to include, not only how do I spend my time, what do I value, what do I, Capricorn, what are my ambitions around that, but the acknowledgement of the value of our elders, right? Like the value of the passage of time, I feel like has been really a conversation on the table because it's like professionally, how do we get where we want to go? Some things are tried and true and we have to step into those modalities, but also personally, how do we get where we're going? Some things are tried and true and we have to step into the wisdom factors that are there. And so thinking of January to December and Venus is back and kind of asking that question of, I showed you what we revalued. We had this conversation and some of it was quite painful in terms of relationships that don't have value or old values, right? That I was basing my success off of, what makes me successful, what makes me valuable. And now that Venus is coming back, I feel like, who's in the network? What have I found that are the priorities for the long-term goal planning that has value to the money, to the relationships, and things like that? And so truly the passage in this conversation of time and value, I think are huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally get on board with all of that. I also think that Venus in Capricorn is like, what is the structure and what is the container of our relationship?
Mm-hmm.
On a personal level, on a bigger level, and how do we renegotiate that? Because we did have the Venus retrograde last year, and now we get, I think, this year and 2 more years of no Venus being retrograde in Capricorn, because it's like a 4 and an 8 year cycle where we get that. So we get a break from it, but yeah, there's still that reminder, and we have to reset our containers in relationship and say, not only what do I value here, but like, what is supportive? Like, what actually gives me the material security that I need to feel okay here? And it's not just material because it's Venus. It is, somewhat emotional too. The moon is obviously more emotional than Venus to a certain extent, but it's like, hey, do we have something solid here? And where are we going in the long term? Like, what is the long-term vision here?
Mm-hmm.
Because we had to let something go or reevaluate something at the beginning of the year. And now we're here and it's like, all right, are we ready to move forward now?
Mm-hmm. And that's a tough question. That has been tough for some people because whether it was, the highly practical material thing, which earth signs work in the material plane. We want to touch it, taste it, feel it, know that there's a structure to it, right? And so whether it was a job, which is what is my long-term value here? What's the beauty? What's the value, the harmony that I can bring here? Or if it was in relationships, whether those were friendships or romantic. And some people were doing the hard work of breaking the delusional bubble of the unrequited love fantasy. And that, you know what I mean? That is not something that they've held on to for a year or two. We're talking about people who are coming out of the woodwork, especially here in our community, talking about, I had this fantasy for 20 years that it was going to work out with me and this person. And I know today that there is no long-term success for me there. And that is a conversation that when we're human and we drop in there, that's tough, but it's freedom. Also, it's practical, it's reliable, it's wise. There's long-term living that can be done,
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's interesting because we're going to have so much of that happening before Venus enters Capricorn in just those first 9 days.
Yeah.
Venus is going to make like so many aspects, right? We've got like Venus opposite Mars, we've got Venus square Neptune, we've got Venus square Jupiter, which is actually quite nice. But
yeah, it is a nice square.
Yeah, but we've got Venus sextile Saturn, which is also can be quite nice. But Venus in Capricorn, it's like mastery and masterpiece and working hard at something and wanting it to be perfect. But before it gets into Capricorn, it goes through Sagittarius, and it's like, I want this freedom that you're talking about, Stormie. Like, and making those aspects like a free Venus in Sagittarius wanting to have a good time, looking across the aisle at Mars and Gemini, like, hey buddy, I want some freedom, I want some love, I want some goodness, I want to enjoy my life.
Yeah.
And then like, how do we make this a masterpiece, with that sextile to Saturn? How do we solidify this and then move into Capricorn and be like, hey, we're mastering this?
And I love that. Like, I mean, of the many aspects, I always love to watch how the lovers dance, because if you've ever been in a relationship, you kind of understand how your partner works. You know what I mean? And at this point, Mars is slowed down in Gemini, redoing the strategy, re-looking at the network, getting the fine details kind of together, right? And Venus is like, listen, I'm going back to Capricorn. I got to show up with receipts and answers. So what can you tell me how we get this freedom? How do we plan this trip? How do we broaden our horizons? How do we have this experimentation, like you said? And they meet in the middle. In opposition, we're trying to integrate and meet in the middle. And Mars is like, try this, join this group, ask this question, have this conversation. So it's the lovers opposed and finding that sweet place in the middle, so that when we hit that sextile with Saturn, it's like, you've got information, go actualize that. I mean, like, I get excited watching Venus and Mars dance and talk all year long because I've been in relationship, right? And I'm like, I know what it's like.
Yes. Yeah. It's really fascinating. And so I'm probably going to drop a couple quotes today. I hope that's okay. I'm a little bit like quote nostalgic, and I love quotes. So I've got like a Pinterest board full of quotes. So one of these quotes is by, and I might be saying her name wrong, but like Anais Nin. And so this Venus in Capricorn, it can also be pretty serious, right?
Absolutely.
And so this Mars opposite Jupiter, this is kind of like a serious quote, but I'm sorry, not Jupiter, Mars opposite Venus is like, hey, how do we negotiate this relationship, right? And then when it moves into Capricorn, it gets kind of serious. So it's kind of a serious quote. So I'm just going to put that disclaimer out there. But the quote is, love never dies a natural death. It dies because we don't know how to replenish its source. It dies of blindness and errors and betrayals. It dies of illness and wounds. It dies of weariness, of witherings, of tarnishings. And I feel like that is so, this Venus opposite Mars is like, hey, we're still together. I still see you. And if I'm willing to replenish if I'm willing to like not be weary, and we can actually take our time, Capricorn, Saturn, to bring this into the future and really reinvigorate whatever relationship we have. And it doesn't have to just be love. I mean, love can be everywhere, everyone, everything, all the time, any kind of relationship.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. And I love that quote. And I love it around Capricornian energy, truly, because, Capricorn is Mars is the space of I want it. Capricorn is like, here's what it's going to take to get it and to keep it. Right. And so this idea that like, we met and we fell in love, whether it's the job or the person, and then you get to that Saturn square together in a relationship and you have to renegotiate who you are as people, who you are as entities, and find a way to let the freedom, let the broadening of the horizons come, but realize it's real ass work, right? Like it takes real work to do Capricorn things. And this delusion that it's all fun all the time is something that I think humans just run into. Ask people who have been at a job for 40 years. Ask people who have been married for 40 years. Ask people raising children that every day you do not get up and you're like, what, you're the whole love of my life. I'm just so, what, right? No. I have 2 children who I adore beyond belief, right? And at one point I was like, what, Miss Girl, what's happening right now? Right? Because these people get grown, they start getting older. Right? And so for me personally, let me talk about me personally, but having that sweet passage of time where the reality of sustainability comes to the table, and it's not about being in the job long term and just trudging it out, but how to be in the commitment long term, refresh it, replenish it so that it's happy. And what kind of sacrifice does that take? So that is, I feel like, when we look at every aspect coming home to Venus and Capricorn for December, that is a long conversation we've had. Yeah. And love dies often because we didn't know what to do with it, how to sustain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so, I do this weird thing called permaculture, which is, it's about sustainability, essentially. It's like how to farm and stuff. And I've taken that concept and I'm not the only one who's applied it to people. And so it's got these different principles of like how we can act and what opportunities we have in order to make our lives or agriculture or whatever more sustainable, more regenerative, so that it's, treating people well, treating the planet well. And I think some of these aspects with Venus bring in some of these permaculture principles. Like one of the principles is applying self-regulation and accepting feedback. And if I'm Venus and I'm sitting across from you, Mars, like the invitation here is applying self-regulation and accepting feedback, because they're both telling each other something very different. And if we can't accept feedback, if we can't sit there, if we're in our pain, because there's a lot of Chiron aspects this month. If we're in our wound, if we're in our pain, if we're in defensiveness, if we're in opposition and we can't see the middle, we can't see how we can, another permaculture principle is creatively use and respond to change. Hey, I'm different, I'm changed. Saturn, Capricorn, time moves, I'm older, I'm more mature, I want to be more mature, whatever it is. Like, how do we creatively use and respond to this change in order for a relationship to continue?
Yeah, which I love, that this is actually, as we're recording and talking, the Venus Scorpio dance, which I think was needed. Like, we gotta have that before we land back here, because I do feel like Venus and Scorpio becomes the conversation of, I'm really actually afraid of that. I'm afraid, right? And what am I afraid of? Am I afraid to be great? Am I afraid to be less than? I'm afraid I'm gonna lose something that I want. I'm gonna have to give up something. Like, what is it that I have been afraid of that allows me to live my value? So thinking all the way back to even as we're listening today, and we're gonna get to have this dance and this experience, like what's happening cyclically, because this is patterning. Right? This is forward and back. Even if you want to today, go back to the last time Venus was in Scorpio. What was going on for you?
Mhm.
What was happening? What were you seeing? Like your greatness is kind of, I love your permaculture, right? Like your greatness is being farmed. It is all of the time in season, right?
Yeah. Are you just like, are you willing? Because Saturn can be fear and Saturn can be hard work. And it's like, are you willing to do the hard work or are you not willing to do the hard work? Are you, and it's slow and it's every day and it's
Mhm.
discipline and it's like willing to show up. Because if you're not, Saturn's also sort of like what falls away, right? Like, what do we have to put boundaries around? This is my container. You're either in it or you're out of it.
Yeah.
And so if I'm building that container, and I'm afraid of like letting go of what's in it to then, be free to say, I'm ready to step into the future. And these, like you said, we're having this Venus Scorpio. We just had the eclipse when we're recording this, and it's time for change. And I'm trying to think today, it's that eclipse, because I'm thinking like, what's 90 days after the eclipse? And I think that might take us into January. So it's not quite yet, but
Mhm.
we're preparing for that. We're preparing for this like 90 days after the eclipse when we're going to start to see those changes
Yeah.
really kick in.
The nice part, I do think, and I'm curious to see if you support this as well, but the eclipse, the Capricorn energy, everything, as we kind of land here in November, just post eclipse, I do feel like most people, though, have seen a lot. First of all, they've seen some things, right? The November version of you has seen some things. So the new year, new me, and January you has seen some things. So it's very different. And I feel like there's a preparedness now where people are like, got it. And so the firming up of that container as we come back to Capricorn season, I am feeling people invite it a little bit more, right? Like seeing that like discipline has actually set me free, not worrying about this because it's not in my lane anymore has like given that pending Venus and Sag freedom where it's like, I was so worried about this over here that there was no time to go have cultural delicious food. And you know what I mean? So as we see Venus roll in December 9th to Sag, it's like, look at all the time and space and freedom you have that you see what the work has provided too. So I just feel like there's a willingness.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Totally a willingness. And I know we've got some interesting lunations this month as well.
Yes, yes. Let's move on to. I feel like poor Venus is like, get off me. Like, leave me alone. Okay, yeah. So we've got to start. We've got the what do we have to start? We're starting with
We can start with the full moon in Gemini on the 8th. And so a lot of this Mars and Venus stuff with that full moon in Gemini is going to come in because I think that full moon in Gemini is at 16 degrees Gemini, and that's right on Mars.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when
where
we
the
have the
eclipse
sun
was.
opposite Mars. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting, right? Because it creates, what is that? Semi-sextile with your neighbor, which
Yeah.
I always think that's interesting. It's a really quiet little aspect because you have to think, you guys remember, in terms of aspects, it's about the conversation and what's the ease of conversation, right? Gemini and Taurus can't see each other, they're neighbors. So it's like, I know you're there and I know you're doing something, but I can't actually see what you're doing. But it is impacting me, right? Like think about changing your yard with your neighbor. If your neighbor like puts up a whole shack and you're like, right? So it's kind of like that. So there is an impact, I think, at that 16 degrees to that signature again anyway.
Yeah, and I think it also brings us back to some of the times when we had a full moon or a new moon square to Mars, which I think was happening in July. We had a couple of those aspects, and I think it was in Leo. So Mars would have been in Taurus at that point in time. I think it was like when we had a Mars Uranus thing going on, and so it's interesting though with the Sun Mars opposition because that happens just once every 2 years.
Right.
And I think it's Adam Gainsbourg who like does a lot of this Mars stuff, and he talks about this 3-day period where the sun is opposite Mars and how he calls it the transcendence phase, and it's a time of like meditation. And so people who have this innately are able to sort of like tap into this stillness within them and sort of like meditate and transcend whatever's going on, but also tap into the zeitgeist. And so I think it's going to be really interesting. I think it's going to be an integration. When you see a hard aspect with Mars and the luminaries, you might be like, yeah, it's going to be kind of hard. But, and also this one with just this like transcendence phase that happens once every 2 years, it's actually kind of special. So I think it might be healing in some kind of way.
I do too. I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. And whenever the sun is opposing Mars, one of the questions that comes up for me immediately is, Sun, I desire, I am motivated for. Mars, this is how I'm getting it done. And right now they are in. And anytime Mars gets slowed down enough to have a different kind of conversation, it does get interesting because they still need to meet in the middle. The desire and the action have to meet, right? But at this point, the sun saying, this is what I desire, Mars saying, I've got information on how we can do that, right? It's on something old. You've already been looking at it. You've already been seeing it. It's already been in your world. You've already talked about it. You've called it. Whatever the communication around it has been, or the networking, Mars now is like, here's the new jam. We can apply to that to meet in the middle, to pull it forward. And so you think about that idea, who I love, Adam, by the way. And there is an interview on this channel with Adam, if you want to check it out. That idea of the meditation, the stillness within that, to have to stop and refocus. I think a lot about the hero's journey. You know, like we've got cool camera and action stuff now, like where they stop and like you see it like all come back around. That's that moment where the hero's like, oh yeah, I saw this one thing in this one town that one time. That's the thing, you know? That's the moment.
Yes, that moment of like brilliance. And we have a lot of that this month too. I'm skipping a little bit, but like we've got a Mercury trine Uranus at some point this month. And so there is a lot of moments of breakthrough and inspiration and aha moments. But back to what you're talking about with like Mars and that stillness and that slowness, one of the permaculture principles is using small and slow solutions. And so I really hope that the slowness of Mars, like the increasing slowness till we get to this aspect that's going to be on the 8th, is really helping us to say like, okay, I've been slowed down, maybe against my will, but now I see it might be good. And these are the ways I want to move forward. And also that slowness is going to help with the Venus stuff that we talked about, right? It's like, let's take it easy. Let's take it slow, because some of the best relationships are ones that happen slowly. It's a slow love, right? It's like, I respect you and now it's slow. And I think there's a respect thing with the sun and Mars, you know, especially with the moon there. I think there's a coloring of respect really built into this.
Which is beautiful because, again, you know, with our theme of look back to look forward, you go back and how are you operating in these principles in this area of your life at the beginning of the year versus who you're prepared, not just physically and materially, but, you know, I think that Saturnian energy in general works at a soul level because it's not really interested in temporary changes. You know, that's why the Saturn returns are so big. It's like literally I'm going to pop your spirit into a whole new dimension because we don't have time for some of this adolescent bullshit we were doing before, right? Like,
yeah.
it pops the spirit, I think, into a place where we're never intellectually prepared to operate until the spirit is convinced. You know, so it's like spiritually, like from how you sit in your hips, how are you different as we're here now? And all of the slowness that you're talking about, we've had time to realize the slow burn is sometimes really great, and sometimes the slow burn has been avoidance. We're gonna have conversations.
Conversations, exactly. That's where I was thinking, because we're talking about Gemini and Sagittarius, and we had the nodes in Gemini and Sagittarius before they moved into Taurus and Scorpio. It's been over a year now since the nodes have been there, but now that we're having these like activations of that stuff, a lot of it was like, what's the conversation? What's the knowledge? What is truth? What do I know? And when we're forced to kind of have, you know, stand in my truth and you're standing in my truth or in your truth, and those are different, we have to somehow come together. And sometimes it needs to happen on a higher level. So like I have a friend who, and a lot of people do this, but she taught me this. And she was like, you know, when you're having trouble with someone else, I invite you to think about like just get into a meditative state and then kind of think about your higher self. And so I literally think of like myself, like up above my head, like crown chakra.
Mhm.
She's like, think about that person and their higher self and meet in a place that you love, like a place where you can't be upset. And my place is the beach with a beach chair, my feet in the sand, the sun, there's like waves, and it's not a busy beach. I've got a cooler with like cold peaches in it. Like, I can't be mad at the beach, like in my bathing suit. It's a wonderful day. And I have a conversation with this person.
Mm.
And I'm just like, hey, can we work this out? And I think that that full moon might feel like this, or might be that kind of opportunity for people to have conversations on a higher level, literally or spiritually, in
Mhm.
order to come back together.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I think about that St. Francis of Assisi line where it says, seek to understand instead of to be understood.
Mm.
And we just, from that position, which I think sometimes that can be misinterpreted as to the acceptance of what's going on, and I'm understanding you means I condone your behavior, which are not synonymous things. It is simply, if I would like to get something done here, let me hear what you are saying. From that position, I can present mine, and usually a person who has been well heard is a little bit more receptive to what's going on. So let's jump this forward because we've got another moon as we get to the end of the month, and it's at one whole crisp degree of Capricorn, which I love because to me it is the absolute signature that you have come in here with some new stuff. You are ready to build in a different way, but it's new. It's new. You maybe don't know this person who's building. You maybe don't know everything about it just yet because 1 degree is like you just got here. You know what I mean? And you get this new moon to plant your seeds of intention to begin. I heard this great quote since we're on the quote bus. This lady said, "You are born looking like your family, your parents, and you die looking like your choices." And I was like,
Oh, yes.
and that's
Wow.
what I think 1 degree of Capricorn means to me today is what did I learn and what am I choosing? Because the doorway to new opportunity is vast here.
It is. It is. The people who I know who have their natal moon like at 0, 1, 2, 3
Yeah.
threes, they have really like just what you said. It's like they've been born with this thing, this experience that might have been difficult, that might have been challenging. If you believe in past lives, sometimes it's like a past life thing. It's like we're starting a new cycle. And they actually are some of the best people, like can be the best parents, like if it's somehow in their chart related to being a really good parent. Like you'd think it might be challenging because it's like so young, but it's like I care so much about this thing, I just want to be really good at it.
Right.
And it's like when you have a brand new fresh opportunity, you don't have any impressions, like you have nothing to lose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think about it quite practically. I mean, I am an earth sign, and this isn't an earth sign, but it isn't a cardinal earth sign. So let's just say that. So the impetus to take action and move something forward is very real. And I think practically about this, sit down with your finances. What do your finances look like? You got a fresh start. What does it look like and where do you want to go? Right? Just put those numbers on paper, right? Get organized. What does this look like? What does this like? I like practical things when we talk about Capricorn because it's just whatever the numbers are. It's just whatever the this is. You know, you know what I mean? It's not like it's entirely mysterious.
You've got the sun coming in, shining on you and Venus.
It's like
as we're talking about the new moon.
I know. Okay, so what else do we got? So we've got that new moon completely useful.
And it's square to Jupiter, which is going to be at 0 degrees of Aries. And so it's like we've got the sun and the moon square Jupiter. And it really is a big blessing, a big new opportunity. One more quote to share with you is like Aeneas and again, life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage.
I love that. But I do want to say, I think it's really important with that square it's a cardinal square. So like I'm ready. I see it. I've been working for this. I've been waiting for this. And then I go take on far more than I can deliver. Right? Like I'm not baby stepping myself out here. I take on the most. And it's like maybe not that.
Yes.
Not that, right? So some mindfulness, some moderation, which is not Jupiter's favorite word, let's be real, is, I think, has to be applied. But the great plan, the great putting it on paper, and then maybe you got to go through later and say, that's not actually, but
Yeah.
maybe today, don't buy the yacht.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't take on too much, but like think about like that Jupiter in Aries is so much courage. It's so much bravery. And so how are we expanding? Are we expanding by taking on too many things? Or one more quote for you is, again, same person. And the day came when the risk to remain in a tight bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. And so are we blossoming or are we spreading ourselves too thin? And I think this could be a great opportunity to have the courage to blossom.
Yeah, and we see the blessing of the return of this. I think, what is it, summertime, around July, whatever we've taken on at this new moon, when we start to have the full moon invitations, right? Like we'll get to see what was the return on investment. So don't be crazy. Don't be crazy, right? Like, because here, I really think this anymore, Taylor. I want to give people like the best advice, and I anymore feel like do this or that. Like there are lessons on both sides.
Yeah. And, speaking of the future too, I think that even before we get to that Cancer new moon or full moon, I'm not sure which one comes first next year because I don't know it's off the top of my head, but we do have an eclipse in Aries.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure Jupiter's right there. And so I think it's end of March, beginning of April. We're going to have this energy where we're starting to see how that story, once we come to summer, is going to evolve. And this is where we can, at those 1 and 0 degrees, plant those seeds to then see that thing happen. And at the same time, all of those Chiron activations that we're having in December, this is a foreshadowing for that, because we're going to have Jupiter conjunct Chiron in Aries. And so all the healing that we're doing now, I think we're really going to see the fruits of that, and the conversation get bigger once we get to the spring. So definitely keep in mind, we're looking back to like January of this year. There was stuff that happened in the spring, stuff that happened in the summer, like a lot of July, August, September, October transits that we had are speaking to this, and we're going to see the fullness like in the spring. So a lot of jumping around the time. Yeah.
Right? It's just beautiful. And truly, you guys, if you follow my channel, all of the videos for the whole year are still up, and in every weekly, there is a slide or there is information in the description box where I say, okay, we've had this transit before on this date, what was happening? So you have a full list of tracking forward and back as to where we're going. So really take a minute, be slowed down with this Mars and Gemini, slow down, look at your life and see the depth of its unfolding so that you really have your best predictive map going forward.
That's awesome.
I'm nosy. There's just so much Mercury. I just gotta know. You know what I mean? I've got the Mercury of Virgo that needs the pattern, and the Mercury of Gemini that's just flat nosy and wants to just share information. And it's really, this is beneficial sometimes.
I was gonna say, I love you and your Virgo that like keeps it organized. It's like, I got the receipts, y'all. Let's go look.
I know. We're gonna get ready to wrap up in a second, but I have to tell you guys, this was so funny when this is like back in the day, right? So several years ago, the not fully established Stormy Grace version was terrible with money. I was terrible, right? I had a lot of learning to do about that before my Saturn return. And today, it was like a couple years ago, I went and got my statements for the year from the bank, whatever. And it was like 2 cents. Okay. It was 2 cents, you guys. And I was like, hey, what's this 2 cents for? Right. And the weight of all of the paper, I'm just standing there going down it. So, when we say like you develop more and more into your chart, and certainly into your rising sign, I was like, what is this? What's this for? And I was amazed at my own development in that way, that my rising sign was really, had matured and was kicking in. So it's like, if you've had that experience, where do you see that you're more and more apt to lean into that rising energy?
Yeah, literally Stormy with the receipts.
I know. What's your rising sign, Taylor?
So I'm a Pisces rising, and I mean, I've shown you behind the scenes my spreadsheets. Like I have, Virgo's my descendant. It's also my south node. So I come in with so much Virgo energy, and in this life for me, it's like leave it behind. Like stop with the spreadsheets, Taylor. Like we know you can do that. We know you keep track. But when I get into the details, it prevents me from leaning into the big picture.
Yeah.
And I just be okay with like being all over the map and jumping around and just, it is what it is. I'm a Pisces rising.
Yeah, it's good, and it's been a beautiful thing to be able to connect with you where we do share that ascendant and descendant in opposition,
Yeah.
because as much
Yeah.
as I've got the receipts, I'm like, Taylor, why are you making a spreadsheet? You just come out here and be brilliant and beautiful and be this new leader and emerge and just let us have some Taylor, and it's
Just go with the flow. Yeah. It's so hard.
absolutely beautiful. So there is so much. There's so much more in December to be looking at. You guys, hopefully you have watched your weekly and your monthly and your annual forecast over here as well. Taylor, I think you have a pretty dope offering to give to people if they want to connect with you. You want to tell us about that?
I do. So I now have 2023 horoscopes up for sale on my website. It's taylorshuler.com/shop. And my name is spelled TAYLORSHULER. So there's no C in Shuler. But if you get lost, just Google and I'm sure you'll find me. And so, yeah, can I share like a code? Is that okay? Or
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys, don't worry, I'm going to put everything in the description box as well.
So just for Stormie Soulmates, use code Soulmates for a great discount on all of the year ahead horoscopes. You can get just one sign, you can get a general year ahead, you can get 3 signs, or you can get all 12 signs. It's a really great deal, and you'll get videos. It's going to be wonderful. So I'd love for you to head over there and check it out. My books are open for consultations as well. And I've got some events coming up this Saturday, November 12th. I'll be on the Sacred Planet 2023, 2024, 2025 forecast. You can find that online too. You can find it on my website. And then Saturday, November 19th, I'll be doing a 2023 forecast. It's a fundraising event for Kepler College. So if you're interested in supporting scholarships for astrology students at Kepler College, definitely check that out. I'll be with Wade Caves, Omari Martin, and brilliant Wendy Stacy as well.
So the crew. Taylor, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your beauty. Thank you truly for coming out here and leading in what we're doing. I want to just say it publicly. I see you. I see you showing up behind the scenes and putting in the work to make this craft and this industry safe and good for us. So I really appreciate you. Look forward to having you back. I don't know if you know, but we have a whole YouTube academy that we like teachers. So if you ever thought about you wanted to teach with us, that could be a thing. And you guys out there, oh my gosh, thank you so much for a little bit of your time today. Hopefully we gave you some things to think about, to take into your life, to take into your journaling and say, okay, where was I? How am I changing? I resonate. I don't resonate. Whatever it is that came up for you, please let us know in the comment section down below. Find out all of Taylor's information in the description box. Find out all of my information, why I do what I do, how I do what I do in the description box down below. And if you like daily transit information and you're interested in that, you can also follow me on Instagram, because remember, we tried daily stuff on this channel once 5 years ago and I wanted to die, so we don't do it here. But if you like a little something else, I got you on Instagram. All right, everybody, have an absolutely gorgeous rest of the day, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are. Sending you lots of love, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.